don't think anyone here is arguing that she herself drove spikes into trees. We have no evidence of that, and we do have evidence of the fact that she was part of a conspiracy that had that as its object. This wasn't a mild offense in which she conspired. This is a very significant offense. There are a lot of people who have been hurt, and there are a lot of people who have been killed through this kind of behavior. Back in 1987, there was a gentleman who worked in a sawmill. His name was George Alexander. He was 23 years old at the time. He wasn't wealthy. You don't get wealthy by working on a sawmill. He was just doing his job, trying to make ends meet. While doing his job, operating a sawmill, all of a sudden, his saw struck a spike that had been placed into that tree. Now, I don't know exactly when that spike was placed in that tree, but at some point, somebody put it in there with that object, with that intent, with that understanding of what it would do. And it had its intended effect. The blade shattered, and it severely wounded him. It caused a wound stretching from his eye all the way down to his chin. His teeth were smashed in, and his jaw was cut in half. The incident made national news. This was 2 years before this incident that we're talking about now. So to the extent, to whatever degree, tree spiking hadn't become understood at the time, it became understood then what happens when you put a spike in a tree. Now, other people were not as fortunate as George Alexander. Other people have died. Other people have received worse injuries than he received. But he was permanently maimed, disfigured, and endured a severe amount of pain, discomfort, inconvenience, and incapacity as a result of this savage act of brutality. 2 years after that happened, and after that made national news, Tracy Stone-Manning did, in fact, yes, none of us are saying that she placed spikes in trees. But when you charge a conspiracy to commit bank robbery, it is not a defense to say that a defendant didn't personally remove money from the bank. Someone who drove them to the scene of the crime, who planned it out, who wrote a threat letter, any of these things can be part of the conspiracy, just as this was. She, in fact, rented a typewriter to draft and send a letter threatening those who might harvest trees with this exact same tactic as was used with tragic success on George Alexander. She closed the letter lovingly with, quote, "You bastards go in there anyway," meaning notwithstanding the threats, and a lot of people could get hurt. That is classic threatening language. There's no other way to interpret that. She and her cohorts used overt threats of violence. There's nothing subtle here in order to achieve a political goal. This is the definition of terrorism. Now, when she told the committee that she hadn't been investigated, this simply was not true. It was widely reported that in 1990, Ms. Manning was required to give hair samples, a full set of fingerprints, and writing samples. She did, in fact, receive a target letter notifying her that she was the target of a grand jury investigation. All of these things are verified by her own admission in the May 21st, 1993 edition of the Missoulian, reading, quote, "Stone-Manning said she could have been charged with conspiracy were it not for the agreement she reached with the U.S. attorney," close quote. So look, it is apparent that she wasn't charged. That isn't the question before us. She wasn't charged because she decided to cooperate with a law enforcement investigation. Now, I'm glad she did that. She was helpful to the investigation. That is a good thing. But it simply isn't accurate to say she wasn't involved in the underlying criminal conspiracy. She was, by her own admission. Nor is this to say that it is insignificant for our purposes here that she didn't personally drive the spike into any one of these trees. I oppose this nomination wholeheartedly.